Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Plenty of buzz around this USC program over the last couple of months. And I think you could make this argument, and I might even say so myself, that you talk about winners of the offseason over the last 2 months. I don't know if there's a bigger winner in terms of what USC has done, not only on the recruiting trail, but, what they've done hiring a really strong staff within this program going into 2025. We've said it all offseason. USC has fundamentally changed how they've operated as a program, and they are currently operating like a national championship caliber football team. We're going to have a lot of storylines from that play out over the next couple of weeks, specifically on the recruiting trail. But I want to switch the tone of the conversation, or I guess switch the subject of the conversation to spring practice. What I want to talk about today is, hey, this USC football team, plenty of question marks we have about this team going into spring practice, but they also have a lot of potential answers on this team as well. What players do we need to hear positive feedback from during this spring practice window? That's what I want to talk about. Now, I think I went with 6 players. Y'all in the comment section, let it fly. There's a lot of players that if we hear positive feedback from, we're going to start feeling really good about this USC team in 2025. Let it fly in the comment section. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Just a shout out to the USC fans. The amount of support that y'all have thrown in the comment section over the last couple of weeks has been overwhelming. It is much appreciated. Really wouldn't be able to do this without you guys. So really do appreciate all the support. Without further ado, let's get into it. Let's start with the quarterback position, and I'm interested to hear from the USC fans because I went back and watched every single game that Jaden started in the back half of the 2024 year. There were a lot of really good things that you saw from him, but there were also things that you still have question marks about. Where do you think the quarterback battle is at going into spring practice? And kind of the way I see it is, look, if USC had to strap up and play a game tomorrow morning, Jaden would be your quarterback one. But I don't think this is, hey, Jaden's the lock to start in the month of August for us. I think Jaden's going to have to win this in spring practice, in fall camp. And I think if you're a USC fan, as excited as we are about Hassan Longstreet in the future of what he can be, you probably don't want to have to rely on him playing good football for you as a true freshman. If Hassan Longstreet goes out and earns it, I think we're all fired up about what Hassan Longstreet can be as a freshman. But I do think that if you're a USC fan, you want to start hearing some positive stuff around Jaden going into spring practice. Now, you get into what we saw from Jaden. There's a couple of things that you love what he brings. One, the verticality. Miller Moss only attempted 10% of his throws that went 20-plus yards down the field. The USC offense didn't have a ton of verticality with Miller Moss at quarterback. Jaden takes over the reins, that number jumps up to 19%. And 19% of Jaden Maeva's throws went 20-plus yards down the field in the back half of 2024. They were starting to become a little bit more explosive. The second thing that you really liked was what he could do pushing it to the boundary. He's got a howitzer of an arm. He can throw opposite hash to the boundary pretty routinely. There are things that Jaden can do as an athlete and as a thrower of the football that Miller Moss was probably limited in. But you also saw a lot of things that you want to see get cleaned up. Now, the good news for USC fans, at least in my opinion, is a lot of the stuff that needs to get cleaned up is not physical. Right? It's hard to change a guy physically as a quarterback, right? You can't just say, hey, we're going to snap our fingers and have you all of a sudden have a huge arm that can attack the boundary. Can't really do that. But what you can help a quarterback with, and what I trust Lincoln Riley to do so, is we got to process better. Because you go back into the film of Jaden in the back half of 2024, there was not a ton of processing. The pocket management left a lot to be desired, a lot of turnover-worthy plays. If Jaden can clean some of the small stuff up, because we know he can make the draw-dropping plays. We saw that on his film at UNLV. But if he can clean up some of the small stuff and kind of show the strong command of the offense, we start feeling better about Jaden being a quarterback one for USC going into 2025. Those are some of the things that I want to hear from Jaden coming out of spring practice. And I think we're going to see a legit quarterback battle get played out, but I would probably say Jaden is the front runner to start at quarterback for USC as we sit today. The number 2 player and probably the second biggest name to follow as we get into spring practice, and that is Tobias Raymond. Yeah, I think a lot of USC fans feel really good about what this offensive line can be, especially on the left side. And you feel really good about what you saw from Elijah Page, especially in the back half of 2024. You're bringing Janory Reed at center, feel really good about him. You bring in DJ Wingfield. Alani Noah played better in the back half as well. The only question mark we have is who's taking over for Mason Murphy at right tackle. It's going to be a competition between Tobias Raymond and Justin T. I'm going to go with Tobias Raymond. One, he was offensive tackle 3 for USC, and USC even threw him into that Michigan game when Mason Murphy and Elijah Page were struggling. You saw some growing pains, but you saw him play some really good football in that bowl game against Texas A&M, the game he got to start in. We knew he was going to be a developmental guy. He came into USC at 6'7", 270 pounds. And so he's got the body right going into the 2025 year. Up to 315 pounds certainly looks the part. If we can feel better about the right tackle position, all of a sudden we feel really good about what the line of scrimmage or what the offensive line can be for USC in the 2025 year. Tobias Raymond, massive name that you kind of feel like if we're going to feel good about USC in 2025, we got to make sure we have good right tackle play. Because we saw when you play those elite teams in the Big Ten, you got to have solid line of scrimmage play. Can Tobias Raymond be that guy? Last one on the offensive side of the football, I'll throw in Xavier Jordan. And I think a lot of people are probably selling their stock on Xavier Jordan. I think it's too early to sell because you go back to the USC wide receiver room last year, it was sneaky really deep. You had guys like Deuce Robinson and Zachariah Branch, the guys that USC kind of forced on the football field, Jacoby Lane and Mekhi Lemon. But you also had guys like Kyle Ford and Kyron Hudson, who were quality wide receivers as well. And so it's really hard for a freshman to get on the football field with a wide receiver room that was as deep as USC was in the 2024 year. Now, all of a sudden, you got two of the best wide receivers, in my opinion, in the country with Mekhi Lemon and Jacoby Lane. And might be one of the best wide receiver duos in the country. Who's wide receiver 3? Could be Jay Fair. It could be a transfer portal addition like Prince Strachan from Boise State. Don't sleep on it being Xavier Jordan. And Xavier Jordan's a really fascinating wide receiver where he kind of flies under the radar because they're kind of very similar to how we talk about Mekhi Lemon. And I'm not making the comp just yet, but I'm saying this is kind of how we talk about Mekhi as well, where you don't have the lightning speed like Zachariah Branch. You ain't 6'6" like Deuce Robinson, but you're a really solid wide receiver that's got really clean movement skills and knows how to separate. It's kind of how we talked about Xavier Jordan. And when you don't have those elite track and field times, you don't stand 6'6", sometimes you fly under the radar. Can Xavier Jordan be that guy to be wide receiver 3 for USC? And I think what helps him get on the field maybe is he's versatile. He can play some slot. He can play out there on the boundary. Who steps up at wide receiver 3 is probably the big question mark. Xavier Jordan's a guy that I think if you hear the buzz around him in spring practice and you say Mekhi Lemon, Jacoby Lane, Xavier Jordan, your 3 starting wide receivers, feel dang good about that unit heading into 2025. Shifting to the defensive side of the football, I went back and forth. And look, on the middle of the defensive line, I feel great about it. I've been very vocal. I think that defensive line is significantly night and day better than what it was in 2024. The big thing I want to see from USC coming out of spring is what do the edge rushers look like? And I think what's so fascinating for USC fans and probably the biggest storyline on the defensive side of the football is, hey, we got to get better rushing the passer with our front 4. We got 3 guys that have astronomical upside. Anthony Lucas coming off the injury, but he was kind of on his way to breaking out in that 2024 year before the injury. Cam Fountain, who was probably the best edge rusher on this football team at the end of the year as a true freshman. And then you have Braylon Shelby. I love Braylon Shelby. Loved him since he came out of high school. This kid is a freaky athlete that looks like an action figure out of a comic book. What I'm most excited for really, you could pick Cam Fountain, Braylon Shelby, Anthony Lucas. And you want all these guys to emerge as elite pass rushers. Who emerges is going to be the question that we find out during spring. What excites me about all 3 of them is, go back to last year. It was a brand new defense with a brand new defensive coaching staff. I think there was a lot of, hey, we got to learn this new defense as opposed to get better as football players. Now you all have that full year within this defense, and now you're going into year 2. Now you're looking to elevate. And so instead of Braylon Shelby spending this spring camp And what are my responsibilities in every single package and play we are on? Instead of that, it's I know what I'm doing on defense. Now I got to get better as an individual football player and get a little bit more polish. Braylon Shelby, really good first step, ton of power in his hands. He's got all the traits. He's just got to develop that tool bag of pass rush moves. Well, Sean Nua, Coach Henney, you kind of feel good about, hey, now we don't need to learn the playbook anymore. Now we just got to get better as a football player. Braylon Shelby, Anthony Lucas, Cam Fountain. This was, in terms of, this is not my evaluation. This is what the numbers are telling us. Last year, USC's pass rush was one of the worst in the Big Ten. If not, I think it was second to worst in the Big Ten in terms of sack percentage. There's a very good chance it's top half, maybe even top 5 in the Big Ten in 2025. You got better on the inside of the defensive line. You have more difference makers, and you have all these young edge rushers who are now kind of coming into their money years. Who breaks out? Braylon Shelby is the guy I'm looking at. Linebacker is also definitely a significant question mark for this USC team. Like, who's the guy outside of Eric Gentry? And it's a thin room. This is a position that I would expect USC to add one more body in the spring transfer portal window. What would make you feel good as a USC fan if you hear some good things about Desmond Stevens or a guy like Elijah Newby? But Desmond Stevens, the guy that we saw play more ball as a true freshman, kind of a similar storyline. Significantly, he's bigger and longer, and he's more athletic than guys like Mason Cobb and Easton Mascarenas Arnold. Now what we need to hear from him is, hey, we know he's the athlete. Now we need to hear of him kind of stepping up and being a leader of this defense. And when you have a veteran like Eric Gentry, who I think is one of the best off-ball linebackers in the country heading into 2025, Desmond Stevens' job is going to get a little bit easier. When you play next to a really good linebacker, your job gets a little bit easier. I'm really excited to hear what we hear coming out of spring, because if you hear Desmond Stevens being that guy next to Eric Gentry, all of a sudden a position group that right now we have big time question marks about outside of Eric Gentry, all of a sudden you start feeling really good about that unit. And then to top it all off, they're going to be playing behind a defensive line that is way better. What's the linebacker's best friend? A dominant defensive line that keeps you clean and lets you play downhill. This defensive line winning at the point of attack, keeping these linebackers clean is only going to elevate what these linebackers could do in this defense in 2025. Last one I'll shout out, Braylon Connolly, a guy that, again, talk about flying under the radar in that 2024 class. Everybody talked about Marcellus Williams, who you certainly could go with when you're talking about guys that need to step up. We heard a lot of good things from Braylon Connolly when he enrolled in the summer. You feel really good about DJ Harvey at one boundary cornerback spot. You feel really good about your safeties in Kamari Ramsey and Bishop Fitzgerald. Who's going to be the other boundary cornerback? Braylon Connolly could be one of those guys. Marcellus Williams could be one of those guys. And if either one of those guys maybe can kick into nickel as well, you need another boundary cornerback to step up. That's one of the things we've talked about. It was pretty clear Dan Lynn didn't have a ton of trust in the cornerbacks last year. Can we have a little bit better play there in 2025? Those are the names that if you told me to pick 6 guys that we started hearing some positive buzz around during spring practice, these would be the 6 that I would choose. And I know we're going to get positive buzz from Eric Gentry. I know Jacoby Lamb and Kai Lemon. I know they're good football players. Who are the other guys that need to step up? This is my list. I know y'all are going to let it fly in the comment section. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.